Influence of ideology on content. The lecture structure today is as follows. What is ideology? What is content in the context of media? How has ideology been defined in relation to media? How is content interpreted in terms of ideology? The evidences of ideology in media content. The word ideology has been defined variously in history, but it made its first appearance in French as idéologie at the time of the French Revolution, when it was introduced by a philosopher, A.L.C. Destat du Tracy, as a short name for what he called his science of ideas. Ideology is a form of social and political philosophy in which practical elements are as prominent as theoretical ones. Today, when we look at ideology, we tend to divide it into 5 steps. These 5 steps are: it contains an explanatory theory or of a more or less comprehensive kind about human experience and the external world. It sets out a program in generalized and abstract terms which can be followed. It conceives the realization of this program as entailing a struggle. It seeks not merely to persuade, but to recruit loyal adherents, demanding what is sometimes called commitment. It addresses a wide public, but may tend to confer some special role of leadership on an intellectual. What is content? Content, as defined by Britannica, is something that is contained in, or which is something which lies within something. Media has different forms of content, we all know. In this lecture, we combined media content along with the explanations of ideology as it is applicable in content. Intersection of ideology and context. You love music, right? We all know that music has the power of making us tap our toes or dancing. We usually like the music that has impact on us because it allows us to shape our environment to help us. At the far end of the spectrum, there is also music that we hate when we are forced to listen to it. The ambivalence about music says quite a bit. At a minimum, the experience of music is inflected by how in control we are of that experience. Even the most basic experience of music is inflected in power and politics. A ready example of would that be that often in our state, when we cross the roads, we hear a certain type of music. Whether we like it or not like it, that music is forced upon us. So what happens then? What we expand the frame to include control over the lyrics also. Similarly, the content of lyrics may not be what we like, but we are forced to accept it simply because it is imposed on us. So therefore, check out the following video that is there in the PowerPoint so that you can experience, you can understand how content can be restrictive.
Build identities, determine behaviors, and forge our dreams. American researchers found that stories repeated in our minds actually interact with our biology. Our brains need shortcuts to simplify and organize information and data constantly coming at us. They impact how we view the world and make meaning from what we perceive. The narrative we tell and are told has the potential to create and continue prejudiced beliefs by those few who dominate the storytelling sphere. So, what dangerous ways has this materialized itself in the media and advertising?
Here comes the various dimensions of ideology. When we talk about the various dimensions of ideology, we go back to Hegel and Marx. Although the word ideology, in the sense derived from Descartes de Tracy's understanding, has been passed into modern usage, it's important to notice the particular sense that ideology is given in Hegelian and Marxist philosophy. Where it is in a pejorative way, ideology there becomes a word for what these philosophers also called false consciousness. Hegel argued that people were instruments of history. They enacted roles that were assigned to them by forces they did not understand. The meaning of history was hidden from them. Only the philosopher understood that meaning. Therefore, the people were in a stage of false consciousness. They were told that whatever is being presented to you is the right picture. Underwent a little modification when Althusser provided a less deterministic notion of ideology, a representation of the imaginary relationship of individuals to their real conditions of existence. That is what Althusser postulated. That is, while ideologies do not correspond to reality, they do make allusion to reality. The central issue to Althusser is that ideology works through the hailing or interpellation of individuals as subjects through the common sense assumptions of everyday life. According to him, the ideological power of the media lies not in an imposed false consciousness, but in the unconscious categories through which conditions are represented and experienced. This definition of ideology definitely put a pressure on content because, therefore, whatever was there on media was accepted as being put on the people, and the people believed that this false consciousness that was there was right. This Marxian definition of ideology was given another dimension by Antonio Gramsci, who proposed the idea of powerful hegemonic force. According to him, the term hegemony refers to the means by which the ruling ordinary order maintains the dominance, and it defines the systematic engineering of mass content to the established order. So therefore, what Gramsci was saying that the ruling order through the hegemony maintains a status quo, maintains a control over the mass media and subsequently over the people. The people are given to believe that their viewpoints are congruent with the dominant order that is there. Antonio Gramsci proposed the idea of a powerful hegemonic force as an extension of Marxism to help explain the power of ideas in helping forestall revolutionary pressures, and this theory is often cited in critical analysis of the media. According to Antonio Gramsci, it is hegemony that makes the masses believe in the power of media culture, and therefore they subscribe to it and they do not oppose it. Therefore, the ruling powers cannot supervise all aspects of the day-to-day introduction of content, but media institutions serve as a hegemonic function in continually producing a cohesive ideology as a unifying force. Therefore, hegemony is seen as a force which colludes the working force to believe in the dominant power structure, in the dominant philosophy. Now, let us take a small quiz and understand how much we have understood the subject. The first question: what sort of music content is usually purveyor of ideology? Is it classical? Is it country? Or is it rap? Who called ideology the science of ideas. The concept of hegemony embodies a belief in the status quo. Working class culture may be adopted, a domination of the working class culture. Hope you got your answers right. The first one is obviously rap. That is a music which today carries the oppositional voice and therefore critiques the popular culture. The person who coined the term ideology is A.L.C. Stutt D. Tracy. Domination and hegemony means a domination of the working class culture. We go to the next philosophers or next set of thinkers who gave shape to the ideologies that are found in media and which guides the content of media. Known as the Frankfurt School of Thinkers, during the 1940s, Adorno Horkheimer criticized mass culture for its uniformity, worship of technique, monotony, escapism, and production of false needs, its reduction of individuals and its removal of all ideological choice. According to them, mass culture created a uniformity which did not do justice to the masses. The Frankfurt School has been criticized because of their uniformity of acceptance of mass culture. They present the phenomenon as loaded with contradictions. They saw it to be the force of resistance against the universalization of mass culture. They never underestimated its origins in privilege, its social importance, and political complicity. Indeed, Adorno seems highly aware of in his book Aesthetic Theory, wherein he points out that high art, despite all its seeming autonomy, has been reified, and therefore high art has become the place for people who have money, whereas mass culture is a place of the ordinary people. Though critics present evidence for the public's ability to restrain from blindly internalizing the ideology of mass culture, the Frankfurt School theorists remain pessimistic in those terms. This Frankfurt School's one-sided view of mass culture being uniform was taken up by Stuart Hall, who proposed a model of encoding, decoding media discourse, which represented the media text as located between its producers, who framed meaning in a certain way, and its audience, who decoded the meaning in a certain fashion, depending upon the social situations and frames of interpretation. These ideas proved a considerable stimulus to the rethinking of the universalization of mass culture. They led to research on the potential of the differential decoding with a view especially to finding evidence of working class resistance to media dialogues. The direct results were meager in this area, but indirectly the theory gave power to the audience and returning some optimism that the audience was capable of interpreting the messages that were coming towards them, and they were not thoughtless mass who never looked into the messages that were coming to them and therefore accepting them unilaterally. The main tenets of critical cultural theory are that ideology works through the cultural tenet, and ideology tries to put in a homogenized fashion to all the mass and therefore creates a mass culture which is ineffective. While we looked at the ideological perspectives of the different scholars and thinkers, we have to analyze this ideology in the context of media. So when we looked at it in the context of media, or in other words, different ideological perspectives representing different interests with unequal power engage in a kind of struggle within media. Some ideas will have the advantage because, for example, they are perceived as popular or built on familiar media images, and others will be barely visible, lurking around the margins of media for discovery by those who look carefully. For those engaged in the promotion of particular ideas, including such diverse groups as politicians, corporate actors, citizens, activists, and religious groups, and the media among the contemporary, they are promoting those ideas there. Therefore, when we look at media, we are looking at the content to find those ideological threads that have been proposed by the different schools of thought. One of the principal reasons why media images often become so controversial is that they are believed to promote ideas that are objectionable. In few, critics are concerned about media texts that promote perspectives they support. Ideological analysis then often goes hand in hand with political advocacy, as critics use their detection of distorted messages to make their own ideological points. As a result, exploring the ideologies of mass media can be very tricky. The most sophisticated ideological analysis emulates the stories of the mass media as potential contradictions, and within it looks for philosophies which might be at different levels of a continuum. Ideological analysis, therefore, is not simply reduced to political criticism, whereby critique denounces the bad ideas, but it is to look for the thought processes in the content of the media and linking it to the broader set of images within other texts and the society. We have to be careful when we make generalizations about the ideological content of media, in large part because we are usually talking about a specific medium and perhaps even specific media texts. Another challenge for ideological analysis is that media texts are produced in specific historical contexts, responding to and helping frame the cultural currents of the day. Mass-mediated images are not static, they are consistently evolving, and therefore the ideologies that we adhere to for analyzing the content has to also evolve in analyzing the messages that we are looking into. So therefore, we have talked about the different ideologies. We have talked about how content and ideologies in media are analyzed, and we have talked about the power structure, the power struggle that goes into it. It's time enough to go in for a quiz and test your knowledge about how much you learned. Here is a YouTube video. Please go ahead and have a look at it.
Look, if you fly into Gatwick, you'll see lots of green spaces. That is certainly true. However, if you have a country in which the population goes up as a direct result of immigration, what you find is not a shortage of green fields, if that's where you wanted to build houses. You find a shortage of primary school places. You find a shortage of GP surgeries. You know, we have fewer GPs per head than any other country in Europe today. You find congestion, whether it's on the roads or the London Underground or wherever you go. And what you find is that actually you're constantly playing catch up, and really the general quality of life for the massive population has gone down. So I think those comments today were wholly irresponsible. And what we've seen, I mean, it's quite interesting to think that, you know, in 1990, the population of this country was 55 million. It is now between 62 and 63 million. That is a massive, massive increase. And I think ordinary folk going about their lives are feeling it. And I think, having a proper immigration policy, controlling the numbers, doing what nearly 200 countries in the world do, namely controlling the numbers that come and the type of people that come, is the answer.
Right. And tell us, how are you going to define the content that you heard in terms of ideology? After you have listened to it, I am thinking that you have got the right answers. Therefore, it can be conservative and or it will be liberal. So, let us do a little sum up of the first part of influence of ideology on content. What did we discuss? We discussed the definition of ideology by the French philosopher Descartes. Then we talked about how throughout the ages 18th and the 19th century, the different versions of ideology have developed. We also talked about how content has been seen in the context of media and how we interpret that content, and that content becomes a place for the struggle of ideology. The content becomes a place for interpretation depending upon the social norms, depending upon the existing power structure. That content in the terms of ideology also becomes a place where we see the evidence of existing culture. So in our first part, we gave you the background of ideology, influence of ideology on content. In the second part, we are going to talk about how this content as manifested in the different media has ideology embedded in it. Thank you.